Hello class, in this video we're going to work on how to compare and order decimals. Before we start, I want you to pause this video and write your proper heading in your notebook with your full first and last name, the date, mathematics, your period, and the title of this assignment of compare and order decimals. Now that we have this, we're going to be using how to compare and order decimals to solve many different types of problems, to solve word problems, to solve volume problems, with conversion factors, and understanding what is greater than and less than. So that's the main point of being able to compare and order decimals. But before we do that, there are some rules that we do need to go over first. Okay, so for our rules, there are a couple different steps that we have to do to follow to be able to compare or even order a set of numbers from left to right. So the first thing is we want to line up both numbers or as many numbers that we are comparing and ordering. So if we're comparing 4 numbers, you would line up all 4 numbers by place value. So you're going to make sure the decimals are right underneath each other. The tenths are right underneath each other. The hundredths are right underneath each other. We're going to go over some examples with that, but we want them lined up by place value, because if they're not directly underneath each other, we will get messed up about which number is greater than the other. The second thing is any spot that is empty, we're going to enter the number 0. So I will give you an example later on of when that will happen. But when you're lining them up, but if you have a missing digit that's not in there for a number, and there is for another number, you want to enter 0 there. Okay. And to compare, when we're comparing, we're going to compare the numbers starting with the digit on the far left. Okay, that's the left of the decimal. That's our largest place value within that number that we are looking at. So before we get started with some examples, I want you to write these rules down in your notebook. And don't forget to title it Rules. Before we get to an actual problem, I want you to look at some of our symbols that we do use. I know that before you've done these numerous times, so it's just a quick review. We have this symbol, which means less than. We have the open symbol, which here means greater than. And we have equal to, means equal, okay? So if I use this one, that means the number before it is less than the number afterwards. If I use this symbol, that means this number is larger than the number on the right. And if I use the equal, that means they're both the same on both sides, okay? We do have a less than and equal to and a greater than and equal to symbol. That is written as with that little line this way, or we could write it as this way, which basically means this number on this side is less than or equal to the number on this side. And this number on this one, the greater than or equal to, means that this side is either greater or equal to the number that's on this side. But for these, we're not going to really focus on them right now. We will in the end of the year. But right now, we need to focus on these 3. So pause this video and copy down these symbols, and don't forget to label it as symbols. So now that we have our rules and our symbols down, let's look at some examples. So first, let's look at comparing. This is the less than, greater than, or equal to that we were looking at. So I have 2 sets of numbers here. So I'm going to write the first set of numbers, and I'm going to write it clearly with enough evenly spaces, right? Because I want to be able to make sure that I could line up my digits the right way. So all I did was I write the first number down. Now that I have the first number down, I'm going to look at this next line. And I notice that I have whole numbers and fractionals. So I'm going to draw out my decimal right now, right underneath it. I want it directly underneath it so that I can match. The 3 is in the 1s and the 2 is in the 10s, so I can write this way. Notice how I'm lining up my digits. So it's clear that I'm going to compare the correct digit in the correct place value. Then I have 2, 4, 8. So the 2 is in the tens, so it's going to go under this 2. The 4 is in the hundredths, so it goes under the 3. And the 8 is in the thousandths. So I have to create one. Now remember in step 2, I said to enter a 0 wherever there was no number. This is what I mean. If I look at it, both numbers start off in the tens, so they both have a digit. The ones, they both have a digit. The tenths, they both have a digit. The hundredths, they both have a digit. But for this 8, there is no digit in the first number. So that means there was no 0,000. So I'm just going to put the number 0 right there in that location. Now I'm done with step 1 was to line it. Step 2 is to add the 0. Now I'm going to compare. So the first thing is I go to the far left, and that first digit is the 2s, which is in the tens place. Since they're both the same, I need to move to the next digit to the right. Again, they're both in the 1s, but they're both 3. So I have to move over to the right. Now I'm looking at my tenths, and they're both 2s. So again, I need to move to the right. But now I notice here I have a 3 and a 4 in the hundredths. So I need to know which one is greater. So I think, what is greater, 3 or 4? So I know that this one is greater. The 4 is greater. So I know that this number is greater than this number. So I'm going to put my less than format because the greater is on the right side. So I know 23 and 23 hundredths is less than 23 and 248 thousandths. Now let's do another problem, okay? Here we have, I'm going to rewrite my first number. So I have the 1, 4, 5, decimal. Notice I'm making enough room so that I can easily line up my digits below. Now I wrote the first one. Now I got to write the second one. So I notice where my decimal is, and on the second line, I'm just going to input my decimal. And the 5s and the 1s, the 4s and the 10s, and the 1s and the hundreds. So I'm going to make sure that I write those digits right underneath the one that's first. Now this one is in the 10th, so it goes below the 3. The 8 is in the 100, so it goes below the 9ths. Step 2 says fill in the 0 for any of the locations. But if we notice, I don't need to do that because every single digit that's on top has a digit on the bottom and nothing extra. So now I need to compare. And in my 100 spot, they're the same. In my 10 spot, they're the same. My 1 spot, there's the same. But my tenths is now different. And since they're different, I can compare them. And now I look at 3 and 1. Which one's larger? Is 1 larger than 3 or 3 larger than 1? So we know that 3 is larger than 1. So this number is larger. And because this number is on this side, I'm using the greater than symbol because 145 and 39 hundredths is greater than 145 and 18 hundredths. I want you to pause this video now and write everything in your notebooks. All right, now that we have the comparing down, let's talk about ordering numbers. Because sometimes we need to order a set of numbers. Sometimes it'll be 2 numbers, sometimes it'll be 5 numbers. It could be any amount as long as it's more than 1. So here we have 4 different numbers. We notice that the space is here in between. Just as a side note, sometimes they do this kind of symbol and just do 1 space instead of the big spaces that I have here. But I wanted to clearly show you how that each number is individual. So I look at it and it says, I need to order the following. And it's telling me from least to greatest. This is a key term, something that we really need to remember and look for. Because if I answered this answer from greatest to least, my answer would be wrong. There's no way coming around it. There is no partial on that either. If in this problem I put greatest to least, I would be wrong because the instruction said least to greatest. So the smaller number must go first. But if I look at this, I have 4 big numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the same rules as me comparing. And I'm going to write these numbers right on top and below each other. Okay? so that I can easily compare. So that's the first number, right? By doing this, I can do all 4 of these at the same time. I do not need to do them in separate and different pairs. That'll just take way too much time. But again, I'm making sure that I am putting each digit underneath each digit. This would be a great time if you have graph paper. This would be perfect to use for it because you have the lines already made for you. Or you can also create your own lines if you so wish, which I'm going to do, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, because if I did my own lines, I would draw a straight line straight down. So it helps me visually see that I have different place values. So I look here and I'm fine on the whole numbers because each 100 and 10s and 1s have the same digit, but not in our decimals. See, this number goes through thousandths, but the rest doesn't. So I need to add a 0 in all of these blank spaces so that I can easily see from my place value. Now I'm looking from order from least to greatest. So I look at these numbers and I'm going to start comparing. I look at the 100 spot because that is the far left. They're all 1, so I can't do anything with this. Then I go to the 10s and I notice 2 of them are 4s and 2 of them are 5s. So I know for smaller reasons that these 2 are going to be smaller than the other 2. So I'm just going to look at these for a second. And I'm going to go to the right. They're both 9. So this doesn't help me. I go to the right again. And I notice I have a 5 and a 6. Well, which one is smaller? Is 5 smaller or is 6 smaller? We know the 5 is smaller. So I'm going to write 149 and 597. And I'm going to just check this off because I know that I used it. But I check it off on both sides. Now make sure that you have it as a check and that it's clearly a check. Otherwise, you'll believe that it's a 1. And I'm going to put a comma, right? Because I already got my smallest digit. And I already knew that this would be the next one because these were the 2 that I was comparing. So I'm going to write 149 and I'm put 6/10. Remember, it's not 600 thousandths, it's 6/10. Even though the value is the same, we need to look at the original question and put it in that order. So I'm going to put a comma to separate and a check to know that I did it. Now I'm given these 2 numbers, and the hundreds are the same, the 10s are the same, the 1s are also the same, okay? If you get confused by going from top to bottom, just rewrite this number right underneath. Then I go to the next one, I'm in the 10s. I have the 0 and a 3. And I look which one's smaller, the 0 or the 3. And I know the 0 is. So I'm going to put 158 and 500ths. Remember, I'm not putting his 50 thousandths because that's not my original number. And now that this one is done, I'm going to write the last one, 158 and 35 hundredths. And then I'm going to box off my answer or circle, whichever way that you want to do to call out that this is, hey, my final answer. All right. And just for clarifications, I can also put a check here so that I know. All right. So don't forget, you line up by place value, you add your zeros, and then you compare from left to right. Also note, if this was greatest to least, instead of starting with this one, I would have started with the 2 5s because I wanted to find the greatest number first, okay, instead of the least. So remember to always read the instructions. Pause this video now and copy down these notes. Now that we have these notes, I want you to try 2 questions on your own. I want you to compare one and order the other one from greatest to least. Remember, in this case, it says greatest to least, unlike the least to greatest we had in the other example. Write down all your notes, show all your work, and if you need to, rewind this video as many times.